There we go. Hello out there, shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers today in YouTube land. Working on a 2007 Nissan Murano. It's got the super duper E6 3.5 liter engine in it. And the battery was dead. Well, I checked and I charged it up and it was running. Battery light was on. Just maintaining battery voltage, it's not charging. I checked, make sure that we had battery voltage down here on the load lug on the alternator. We had battery voltage there. I checked the regulator pins and they were all good. And I could see, you can't really see the belt from up here, but I could see that when the engine was running, the alternator was turning. So I knew it had a belt on it. Well, as I got into this thing, I thought, well, we're going to have to put an alternator on it. So I took the upper radiator hose off. Obviously, you got to take a bunch of plastic Christmas tree plugs out of the dash. I left that last one in, just spun that out of the way. But your air intake and the one on the passenger side of the car, they're all over there. There's two connectors on your cooling fans. To release them, squeeze in at the top, and that little bulbous thing there will squeeze inward, and then you can pull up. Same thing on this side. And all of these connections were already unhooked because somebody else has been in here, which we're going to show you. Took the radiator hose off, stood it up here by the transmission dipstick tube, and two bolts or screws actually that goes into the radiator that holds the fan system. It's all one piece, both fans all one piece. And fellas, these are just screws that go into the radiator. Be careful, if you drop these, lose them. Don't just go get you another screw and wind up running a screw into through the tank of the radiator. You're going to have a problem. And when you tighten them up, just be gentle so you don't break that plastic housing. You can be putting a radiator in it. And I didn't take the battery and the battery tray off. I just pulled it up a little bit and reached in there and kind of pried it back just about 1/8 of an inch and pulled it up out of there. If you want to take the battery out and the battery tray and all that, have at it. I don't like to take a bunch of stuff apart. I don't have to. But I got in here and I noticed that this AC discharge line or suction line, not the discharge, the return or the suction line is what I meant to say, was loose. And I could see it down here where it went onto the compressor. Well, try to get you can just barely see it right there. It was loose. And so I did the right thing and I went ahead and tightened it. I could see that somebody's put a new AC compressor on it. That's probably why all this stuff was taken out before. But I got to looking when I took the side cover off. Just turned the wheels to the right. Took that side cover off. Four of those little Christmas tree jobs right there, and pull that cover off. Well, I noticed that the belt was loose. So I said, well, hey, all we need to do is just tighten this belt. Well, the tensioner on this is right there, and to work it, just need a long extension with a 14mm swivel socket on it. And see that right there at the tip of my light? That's what you turn. You turn it clockwise and it's left-handed thread, and it pushes that tensioner downward and applies tension on the belt. While I was cranking it down, I did get it to tighten up a little bit. At least the slack was out of it. I started it up, just put the hose back on, put the battery cable back on, started up, the battery light went out, but it still wasn't charging, and it was squalling. Well, then I got to messing around with it. Well, the daggum alternator is bad. What? When I was taking the belt off, I seen the alternator moving. I said, well, that ain't right. What the hell's going on with this thing? And so I'm watching videos of other guys putting these alternators on, and they'd get to this point, and then all of a sudden you'd see the alternator laying on the floor, and they really didn't show anything about the top. They did show that the main pivot bolt, hang on, they would show that the main pivot bolt that goes through here, it's really not a pivot bolt, because the alternator doesn't move to tighten it, so it's not a pivot bolt. But that bolt goes in through this way, and then it has a 14mm head nut right here, and that bolt has a hook on it, and it'll hook onto the ear of the alternator so it doesn't turn, so you don't have to put a wrench back here. In fact, there's no head on that bolt that you could put a wrench on anyway. But they'd show getting this out, and they wouldn't show anything about this end. I'm saying, well, there's something missing here. And I watched about 5 or 6 different videos, and none of them showed the top of this, which is just I don't know what size bolt it is, but it's a 14mm head bolt that goes through there. But they wouldn't show taking this apart. Well, that's where we're having a problem. So, let's see if I can get my light down there where we can see it. You can see this right here. Well, that looks like that's broke to me. And that alternator is supposed to just fasten to this bolt right here. That's in that top one ear that I showed you on that other alternator. But this bracket is not supposed to move. So right in here underneath would be like the cam cover. There's one bolt. Now let's see where I put that piece that I took off. Hang on a minute. Here it is. A 12mm bolt that goes in there. It's broke on that side. And it appears that maybe there's a part of it that's broken there. But this upper bracket for the alternator mount, and it holds this support for your wiring harness, it's got to come off, and I'm going to have to go to Salvage Yard and furnish that bracket, and then maybe we can put the new belt on and tighten this alternator up, and I bet we don't have to replace it. So, let's see. I said that bolt that goes in right here is a 14. Looks like it's a 12. And normally that bolt would go this way through a bracket into that is threaded. But this bolt, the bracket goes behind, so the bolt goes through this way. So we'll get a 12mm socket and short extension and come in this way and take that 12mm bolt and let's see. Looks like this plate that goes up and holds all this wiring, looks like that plate is welded to that bracket. So there's no, like a 10mm bolt holding that. So we got to loosen all this up here, get that off there, take that ground wire off that's bolted on there. 10mm socket. But let me get that off. Okay. I got the bracket off. And so as you understand, This bolts right there on that ear of the alternator. This piece would be rigid, secured to the car, and you would put this up in there, run your long bolt through, and then push your alternator up and line it up and put that 12 millimeter, I can't talk, it's kind of chilly out, 12 millimeter bolt through there into that ear, tighten it up, tighten this one down there, and then your alternator would be secure. You don't have an automatic tensioner like on most vehicles. You have to tighten that other belt or bolt that would be like going down in through here where your tensioner would be about located right there. But this is broke. This is the piece that I took off of the engine. Had a 12 millimeter head bolt, and there's another piece of this that broke off because this doesn't line up. Well, yeah, there it does. I thought it looked like it went there, but no, it goes right there. Well, that's how that bolts together. I could weld this up, but do I want to do that? Or do I want to go to the junkyard? Let me debate. Well, I think I'm going to try to weld it. I hate going to the junkyard, especially for something like that. Well, I decided I wasn't going to weld it. I tried to put a bead on it, and I don't know, it must have some I don't know what kind of metal in it, but it is magnetic, but anyway, I played around with it and couldn't make it penetrate right, so I just went to the salvage yard. So we're good to go. Now we put this thing back together and see what happens. Maybe we'll have an alternator that charges. Okay, I got the bracket put on. The alternator is tight. You can see there the bolt that goes in from the back side of the alternator and that bracket that we had to go get. The battery cable is in, or tight, and you can see the connector right behind it for the regulator. It's plugged in, and well, I can't really see the belt from there. The tensioner, well, let's see. Okay, it's the socket's on the tensioner. I don't have it tight. I think that's as tight as I want to go with it. Now we'll go down there and tighten the 14 millimeter nut on the tensioner pulley, because it slides up and down. Your belt goes around the crankshaft, under the tensioner pulley, up over the alternator, down under the air conditioner, and back around. And so once you get the belt tight enough and tighten that 14 millimeter nut, now that bolt that goes through the alternator is up behind this pulley. You can see the nut. No, it's right here, right there on the end of my finger. That bolt wasn't even tight, So that bushing that slides into the rear ear on the alternator, it wasn't even pulled tight. So whoever worked on this sure did a number. And what I was talking about, when that bolt goes through there, through here into that ear and comes out right here, and you put a nut on it and crank it down. When you crank it down, you don't mash these ears together. No. You mash this ear up against the, oh, I don't know, we'll just call it a cog on the, or the mount on the block. It tensions it right here across that face, and then the bolt pushes this bushing inward until the inner face of that bushing contacts the face of the machining that holds it right there. So this ear, there is no tension on this ear. It just stabilizes this bushing. If you have tension on this ear, it'll break. It'll break, or it'll break up in here and bind the case and chew up the bearing or even short the alternator out. So this ear only is a stabilizer. It just holds on to that bushing. But when you tighten it, that bushing slides inward, and it probably only, you've got, what is that, about 3/16 of an inch there, maybe a quarter. So when it slides in, it'll probably slide in about half of that distance that's out here. And when you go to put them back in, if you take one out and you go to put it back in, drive that bushing outward a little bit, and that gives you a little bit more room to wiggle your alternator up in there. Even if it's a new one, make sure that this is flushed so you can get it up in there. Sometimes they fit pretty tight. But anyway, we've got the car. I've already started it. Well, we'll start it again. And the battery light would be right here. See, the battery light's on right here in the tachometer cluster. As soon as it starts, the light goes out, and I put a voltmeter on the battery. We're charging at 14.6 volts. The belt's not squalling, and we're good to go. So we'll shut it off before it starts getting hot, and get the radiator, the fan put back on, and send this one on down the way. So we did not have to replace that alternator, which is good. They spend all their money paying me to fix all this other crap that was left loose. But just like I say, remember, when you put these screws in right here that holds your radiator fan in, don't crank them down with your ooga doogas. Just snug them up, and that's it, because you risk breaking those. I've never broke one, but I could see how somebody might. And just be careful when you're putting your fan in that you don't bust your hose fitting there. And don't forget to put your hose on there for your overflow tank, and be careful around this that you don't break that off. And just kind of pull your AC discharge, not discharge, here I said it again, your suction hose, your low side line, just move it out of the way. You got enough room to get that fan system down in there, and then pull your harness around and plug it in. Then put your cover back on, you're good to go. Guys, thanks for watching. Share, like, and subscribe. Comment if you will.